Hey everyone, welcome to the next episode of the Good People Podcast. And today I'm extremely excited to have the Jesse Hernandez from Depth Builder. Jesse, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining.
Oh man, I am excited.
The energy is already infectious. We've already been kind of riffing off the record for it's already been 20 minutes, Jesse. So I hope you got a little extra time on the end there. So we'll jump right into it, man. Obviously, we connected via LinkedIn, so really appreciate you sharing the message that you have been sending. You mentioned just recently that you started Depth Builder in the last 18, 19 months and have obviously significant experience in the trades. One thing I was reading about you is you went from digging ditches to now advising executives, right? So
Yeah.
tell our audience a little bit about the journey that brought you here to this moment right now.
Oh man, Nick, appreciate that. It's a windy, twisted road, and I don't think anybody could have scripted it. So I started my career in the industry back in the 1900s, back in 1995 as a plumbing apprentice. My dad's a plumber.
Nice.
And it's not like I aspired to be a plumber like Dad. I hated plumbing. Like we used to have to help him on side jobs in the weekends and the evenings, and I absolutely hated it. But I graduated high school and I needed to get some cash to pay for room and board because I was trying to be walk on at a junior college.
Nice.
And yeah. And so I was like, man, I need a job. Dad said, hey, this company's hiring. Like you have some experience, like give it a shot. So I applied, they hired me as like a laborer. And I walked on site and it was a renovation of a middle school here in San Antonio. And it was like, oh my God, this is where I belong. It was just after a week or so, the sensory input, like I'll summarize it this way. The conditions of a job site were perfect for me to thrive in, which were not the conditions of a classroom, right? Like the classroom environment, I'm not saying it's horrible for everybody. I'm saying it's horrible and miserable for me and kids like me. Yeah. So I'm like, man, I can compete out here. It was very physical work, the problem solving, the risk. Like I'm crazy, right? I like doing crazy things. And so it totally engaged every bit about me. So I decided to make a career of it. I talked to some of the guys and they were like, hey, dude, I talked to Johnny Martinez. I was super, super fortunate in that I had some really good mentor advisors along the way that steered me in the right direction. And Johnny Martinez was one of them. He's like, hey, I need you to go and fill out your registration so you can get your registered apprenticeship with the state of Texas.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's dumb. He's like, do it. Okay, I did it. And I ended up getting like a $6 an hour raise after I got my card. I'm like, oh, I like this.
Nice.
And I remember I was looking around and most of my peers that were apprentices or helpers, they were 40, 50 years old. And I'm like, hey, Johnny, like, I don't want to be a helper when I'm 50. He's like, good. It's like, here's what you need to do. You need to go to apprenticeship, find yourself an apprenticeship program, stick that out and start buying your tools. So, I followed his direction. That helped. And my plan was just to be the best damn apprentice possible. I competed nationally back in 98. I was at a national craft competition. Nice. And I got third. I didn't win. Nice. I got third, which was because
Jesse,
of my.
So you were potential walk-on athlete, right?
Yeah.
So what sport was that?
Baseball.
Baseball. Nice. What position?
I was an outfielder, left field and right field. Yep.
Okay.
I wanted to be a shortstop. What's that?
I was going to say then the next stage you became almost like a tradesperson, skilled trades athlete, right? You were
yes.
Man,
and you know what, Nick?
In your blood, baby.
Man, I don't tell anybody, but I'm a little bit competitive. Like I knew my first year of apprenticeship.
Yeah.
That when I heard about that championship, I was like, I'm going. And I'm not waiting till my fourth year. I'm going third year, period. And I made it happen. And it was in Maui. Like I got a trip to Maui to go and compete in this thing. It was amazing.
Jesse, can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
Growing up, was that competition innate in you, or was that something that it was just from a young age you knew that you just had that? Because I have two young boys, and a lot of our obviously listeners and audience has kids, and sometimes when I always like to think of when parents are high achieving, right? They look at their kids and obviously in skilled trades as well. Oh, these kids don't want to work these days, but in reality, there's got to be more to that story. So for you, like, do you recognize that you were competitive from a very young age, or was it something that was cultivated as you went along?
Yeah, that's actually a fabulous question. I'm going to say all the way up until maybe my eighth grade year,
Hmm.
I was a passive, just kind of go with the flow, have fun. I just want to play and be liked and be accepted
Yeah.
kind of guy. From eighth to ninth grade, it was like I'm taking on the damn world. Like I'm gonna win. Now, I will say there's some pretty traumatic events that I experienced in that period of time that I think contributed to that. And I think, I think all kids, this happens for all kids at that age, like that seventh, eighth grade year,
Yeah.
all of a sudden your social awareness kind of kicks up.
Yeah.
And I just knew like the girls gave the attention to the athletic guys.
Mm.
Okay, I need to be an athlete. Right. Like it was that was my calculus. Like,
Yeah.
how can I get the most attention? Let me play sports. And I had some natural speed and I had, I never had like the supernatural gifts of like what's the like balance and quick speed and all that, but I knew how to work freaking hard. And I
Nice.
got that from watching my mom and my dad. That's what they did. And so from there, my competitiveness kind of came in and took over. And I joke, I'm like, no, I'm not competitive. I just win. That's like in my mind, yes, you're my peer, which also means you're absolutely my number one competitor. I'm just not going to tell you that, right? Like I want to have fun and all that. But yeah, so it's always been a thing. Like, okay, I know how to at least get up to the level of people that have been there longer than me, and that's put in work, put in
Yeah.
time, put in the
Yeah.
reps, right?
Right.
And then fine tune and etc. So I went to the competition. I
Yeah.
lost third place, which was fine. Got my journeyman license. Again, I just wanted to be better than all the other plumbers that I was working around. Got promoted to foreman. Again, I just wanted to beat all my foremen. Now, and I think that like my competitive nature and my curiosity, like I have to learn a lot about like I will obsess like right now I'm obsessed about learning copywriting, designing landing pages, designing offers
Nice.
because I want to learn it. And when I go on my run in the morning, I'm listening to something, a book or some person
Yeah.
about the topic. And so I've always done that too. And it has served me well over my career. So as a foreman, I'm like, okay, you gave me all this damn paperwork and now I have all this responsibility, but I don't understand. And it was an employee owned company. So I'm like, if I can make, and we would get bonuses, right? Based on the job performance, job by
Nice.
job. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, there's got to be some math here for me to make a plan so that I can know, am I winning or losing every day, not at
Right.
the end of the project.
Right.
Figured, so I went talk to the estimator. Hey, estimator, can you tell me how these estimations and how do you get these hours and how do you get the labor units and how da, 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 da. And I was like, there it is. Let me pick that apart. And so it was that type of, I don't know if it's tenacity or insecurity or probably both combined that I had to get an edge, right?
Right.
And that from there became superintendent. And then I was assistant production manager. I was in charge of, I developed some internal transitional training that took people from installer to foreman and
Nice.
foreman to superintendent.
Wow.
Because, right? Like, because I mean, you're in the business, right? It's like, oh, here you go. I'm going to bless you. You're a foreman now. And because you install really quickly, like, oh, bad option. So I lived that pain and I'm like, employee owned company, I get money back. If I can minimize the financial, like the business pain of people having that learning curve,
Yeah.
and also the human and personal pain that my friends were going through, because it sucks to be told you suck all the time. And to
Right.
go to the jobs, like the GC's telling you you suck, your team is telling you suck, your project manager and suit, like everybody's telling the foreman they suck.
Yeah.
That's the hardest job out there, bro. Like, no doubt in my mind, the foreman role is the hardest, worst job out there. Anyhow, so I put training together to like help people, like, here, do it like this, and it'll be a lot easier. That led to speaking with industry organization. That's when I got introduced to lean construction, and that put me in front of like general contractors and other decision makers. So I ended up getting recruited to go work for one of the biggest commercial builders in the country for this super awesome job. that like I didn't know I could do it. I'd never played at that level before, but
Yeah.
let's give it a shot, you know. I did that for a few years. From there, I went to work for a national brand as their director of environmental health and safety, which again was a huge leap. I don't have a background in safety, but I was brought in to help transform the culture.
Nice.
And that I have some experience with, right? It's a people
Yeah.
thing, it's understanding what's going on. Now, we got to remember like going from an apprentice plumber to all those other weird jobs I had with that one company. I was with them for 17 years to working for a general contractor, traveling the country, coaching project teams and business units to help them enjoy life more. I mean, that was my goal. And
Yeah.
then going to be a director of environmental health and safety. That doesn't just happen, right? There
Right.
was a lot of learning that I had to do and a lot of internal garbage that I had to work through, right? Because in
Right.
my head, I'm still just a skinny little plumber from the south side of San Antonio, right? Little
Mhm.
troublemaker that doesn't get caught all the time, and that's good. Um, the dang when COVID hit, I had to stay home. I was traveling. I may have been sleeping in my bed 3 nights a week, which was fun. I loved it. But now I had a ton of time to think. And I was like reflecting on like I'm in this amazing position. How in the world did this happen? Okay, I kind of figured that out, have an idea. Then it's like, okay, I love my job, but there's this like sliver in my job brought me so much fulfillment, man. And I'm like, okay, what is that? And so when I looked deeper at that, it was, I do a lot of facilitation, workshops, coaching, problem solve, all kinds of magical stuff.
Yeah.
But when I work with people one on one or with small groups for like an extended period of time,
Right.
I can see the transformation in their thinking and in the way they treat each other, meaning their peers, their people at home,
Right.
and they start making big decisions and living life differently, maybe more intentionally.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's it. That's the stuff. How do I do that full time? Like
Yeah.
that was the question. I need to figure out how to do this all the time.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'll start a business. And I had no idea how to start a business. Anyways, launched the business. Now Depth Builder is my company, consulting primarily in the construction space. And so I joke like in terms of the scale of credibility, I started at the top in the trades and I've slid all the way down to the bottom with the consultants.
Yeah, but I mean, I think sometimes that's the uniqueness, though, right? Because a lot of times in the trades, everyone looks to see, the first thing is like they want to compare the badges. So it's kind of like, oh, what have you done? And then once with your background of just like, man, I've started from here, work my way up. I choose to be here. Whereas a lot of consultants have to be consultants because they can't cut it in the real world, right? And and
Woo.
and in safety, and I mean you've seen it as director of on our side, even on our consulting side, when we're consulting with companies and things like that, the one thing that separates companies that do well versus companies that are just providing lip service is the people in the middle, the real world people. I'm like, dude, you could never do it in that sequence, in the real world. There's no way, right?
Right,
And,
right.
and then they lose all credibility of like, oh, that consultant doesn't know what they're doing. They've never done it in real in the real world, so it doesn't even matter. So they'll sit through the training, but they'll let the consultants talk themselves out of the training, but then they'll just go back to business as usual, which is probably what you've seen in terms of that
Yes,
culture, right? But
yes.
that's so your experience is probably the most credible thing. But it seems like so one of the things was obviously that I was mentioning to you was in terms of talking about the sweat equity improvement. That is that the culmination of everything that you have seen so far? Experience you built in that ability to increase production.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's probably the best vehicle to deliver all the best experience that I've had over my career. And so what I mean by that is like when I was back working for that mechanical contractor, I was a lean freak, right? Continuous improvement, optimize outcome, like all that stuff. But I did it to people,
Mm,
right? Like I would give you a list of all the things that you're doing wrong that you need to fix, and I'll be back in a week to make sure you did it.
yeah.
Nobody likes that. Like nobody appreciates that.
Right.
And I was a dictator, so I was the internal last planner system champion. And so I did all the training, and I'd go out and help teams set up. And what did I do? I come out and I give them a list like, nope, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. And so, it was in terms of like safety professionals and lean professionals, I think lean, the way I did it made me less liked than the safety person.
Mhm. That's
And so I'd show up on site, nobody would make eye contact, like, oh crap, here he comes, he's gonna get all in our business. So it took me a long time to learn that instead of doing it to people, if I did it for them, right? Like if I use my knowledge and my analysis and whatever, my way of thinking and operating in service to others,
Mm.
that friction goes away, right? Like if I come in and say, Nick, what's kicking your face? Or I'm just going to hang out and talk to you a little bit and kind of watch how things are going. And when I see something keeps bugging you or rubbing you, and I say,
right.
hey, I have an idea for that. How about we try this?
Right.
I don't have to be driving my initiative. I'm just trying to serve you with the natural thinking that I have.
Right.
That opens the door to like, okay, like what else you got? Well, let me show you, right? And so that's one element, like huge thing is the sweat equity improvement really is about how do we apply our lean knowledge? And if you don't have lean knowledge, it's fine because you're going to learn it through the thing. But how do we apply our, rather leverage our influence
Yeah.
as leaders to make the work better for the people doing the work? So that's one thing. The other chunk is, in the lean omniverse, there's all kinds of tools. And people always ask, like, what tool should I start with first? I'm like, don't start with the tool, start with the problem. Let
Mm.
the problem pull the tool. And
Yeah.
so, I do the song and dance, pep rallies like 5S and here are the 8 waist, and which is fun. But if you can't immediately apply that knowledge,
Right.
it's just mouth noise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what this does is like we go through the learning after each session, you're directly going to apply those concepts and get an understanding of what it feels like and smells like for
Right.
real, for real. And so the other part, which is huge, that I'll probably be working on forever. All my exes say I'll never figure it out, but it's the listening part, right? And so part of that, the sweat equity improvement is obviously assessing the work, capturing some footage of it, or just physically being there studying it, and like listening from the hidden tells from the installer of what pieces of the work are hard. Obviously, I can ask them, but most of us in the industry, in the trades, it's not hard. My famous saying was, if it wasn't hard, project managers would do it, which isn't a very nice thing, right? Like some people don't appreciate that joke. But we're so desensitized to this disrespectful, neglectful work that we just do it. And so when I ask somebody, hey man, what part of your job is hard? They're like, talking to you, leave me alone, right? They have no concept. And so, but when I look at somebody and I can see like they're like wiping their head or like taking that deep breath and stretching back, like, oh, that's an indicator. And so we let that be the focus, the driver for the improvement ideas, not to
Got it.
optimize output, not to remove waste, to make the work better. And
Got
then
it.
there's this whole socializing element built into it that again requires us to listen. So, in terms of listening, doing it, performing or sharing my gifts and talents in service to others and leveraging my influence to serve others, all of that's baked into this sweat equity improvement idea.
Nice. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was in that, part of just doing some of the research on it, if you one of the targeted outcomes that on the sweat equity SQI program, if you will, is sort of like I think it was like a mind shift around improvement of work. So right. And so you
Yes.
you kind of talked about practical applications and things like that. If and a lot of our viewers are superintendents or future superintendents or they're assistant superintendents now, what one or two things could you tell them in terms of could they start thinking about on the job site they're at today in starting to prepare for that mind shift, starting to shift that their mind around how they look at improving work? What would you say like that? Not necessarily like what's the first shift that they can start to make in looking at things a little bit differently?
Phenomenal question, Nick. The very first thing that, like, if you just want to make a shift on yourself, is become aware of the zoom level that you're looking at work through. And so, what I mean by that is, as a superintendent, if I'm a superintendent for a general contractor, I believe that I'm looking at every single detail. But the truth is, no, we're looking at a 30,000 foot level. We're looking at logistics and movement and placement and bulks of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do I have the right quantity? Are they in the right area?
Right.
And that can be optimized. And there's a lot of systems and a lot of great people out there very focused on optimizing that and having amazing results.
Yeah.
But that's not the only level, the only zoom level that we need to be focusing on, or rather, that can be focused on, especially with the dang labor shortage that we're living, right? That we're going to live for probably another 20 years at least.
Yeah.
The next zoom level is, think about when you walk the job site. Do you even recognize people's faces? If you just 15 minutes, do you recognize anybody's face? Probably not. You probably have a head count, 6 plumbers here, 3 sheetrockers over there, some carpenters over here. The zoom level we want to get to is spend 15 minutes engaged with somebody, meaning having your eyes and all your attention engaged on the hands and eyes of one installer. That is a different zoom level. And some people, it's kind of freaky. So when you hear that, Nick, how does that make you feel?
Gives me anxiety, right?
Tell me why. I love that. Tell me why.
Like, because my initial reaction's like, you want me to focus on one installer? Like, there's so much other stuff. If I have one eye on this, right? My initial reaction is like, who's going to be watching everything else? Is that
Yes, natural, bro? Like everybody, like, oh my god, well, like here. And so now that if you want a second thing to like shift, like, yes, one, yeah, that's a lot. We're talking about 15 minutes. We spend that on social media. We spend that half-ass reading emails. Like, you got 15 minutes. I promise you got 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So 15 minutes, hands and eyes, paying attention to the work, looking for the painful, challenging elements in that work. Now, you here to for like help us out, right? That person is not the only person doing that arrangement of movements or that sequence of work.
right?
There are multiples of people doing that
Right.
all day, every day.
Yeah.
Okay. Not just on this project, on the next project and the next project and the next project. And so if I spend the 15 minutes to really get engaged with what and understand the painful elements of the work that one person is doing, and I do something that removes 1 minute of time and a whole lot of discomfort and irritation for the person, yeah, it's only 1 minute per 15. So that's
Right.
4 minutes per hour, right?
Right.
That's 32 minutes per day. You follow me?
Yeah.
So and that's with one individual. So then there's another, and you can scale that compounding benefit of getting down into the zoom level, the super tight zoom level of hands and eyes. There is an enormous amount of burden and waste to be removed from the work to optimize the work. And so, you know, which is the best trade to do that with? I mean, look at your critical path and pick that trade and pick one person from that crew and do it on the front end, and you'll experience tremendous value.
Nice, man. That's pearls right there. That's interesting because in a bigger way, and similarly in terms of how that can be applied, even in non-project based environments. The way I think
Oh,
about it is what you just mentioned is, yeah, having the willingness, like you said, dedicate. Everyone has 15 minutes.
yep,
Finding a way to use that usefully because the compounding effect. I think that's the most interesting part is whether that's a sales team, recruiting team, things like that is like
yes,
the number of conversations they're having over the course of 1 hour, 8 hours, 5 days a week, 2,080 hours a year. Now, if you just change what you think is just, man, I don't have 15 minutes, but being able to keep that long-term vision of if I can just make one iota of an optimization here, the
yep,
compounding effect can be significant. So that awareness of just 15 minutes can lead to 15% on the added to the bottom line, right?
uh, directly to the bottom line. That's the
Right.
like that's the thing is it's directly to the because we are. I mean, anybody. I'm just going to say it. I might get maybe it'll help with comments and interaction. Everybody's bid is inflated
Right.
to accommodate the inefficiencies, the ignorance, and just the jacked up situation that construction is right now.
Right.
And so it and you go and make these kinds of improvements, it goes directly to the bottom line because it's already inflated to absorb all of the damn disruption and jacked up situations we're dealing with.
Right. And so that kind of comes into one of the things we were talking about in terms of, the inefficiencies in working around poor design and things like that, and how that empowerment can come in through. And a lot of times you might even find that the reason it's so challenging is that design is incorrect, which then makes the people that are building it have to kind of say there's got to be a better way, right? So can you talk to a little bit about that in terms of you know, the challenges of working with the improper design as you were talking about that earlier?
Yeah. So just for some clarity, when I'm talking about designing the work, I'm not talking about the materials. I'm talking about should I go up and down the ladder 8 times or 2 times?
Got
And
it.
what would it take to minimize that? That's what I mean by designing the work. Now, in terms of like design, architectural engineering, all of that type of design, I've been in the industry since 95, man. And it's easy to say back then everything was better. Like whatever, right? It sucked back then too. And so if I have a design that is incomplete, I've also never had a design that was 100% complete. So I don't know what that's like.
Got it.
If I have a general contractor, like, and this used to be my mindset, all general contractors suck. But only the general contractors I worked with sucked. And then I met a whole bunch of them that are amazing. And then when I was on the GC side, all the trades, we just don't have enough experience, right? They're just whatever. Like, okay, but have you ever had all the experience you ever needed? And
Right.
so, like, it's easy to complain and point the finger. But so, in terms of like the big problems, design or completion of design or complete design, coordination, procurement, planning, like running the orchestra as GCs do, or trades being inadequately prepared, inadequately skilled, the one thing that can overcome all of that is communication,
Right.
right? You and I were talking about it beforehand. If I order a pumpkin pie and I want 6 of them and all you have is 4, and you tell me, Jess, all I have is 4 and get you 2 on Monday, that's the deal, right? And I have to listen to that. I can scream and yell and cuss and threaten you and degrade you. It doesn't change the situation,
Right.
right? And and what that would do if I scream and cuss and yell, it's going to condition you to tell me what I want to hear to avoid that acute pain of that negative interaction.
Yeah.
And then you're going to let me down because you only have 4. And so, like pumpkin pie, I'm just using that because it's October and I love pumpkin pie. If we would just be courageous and vulnerable and honest about what the hell we're actually dealing with, where we actually are, what our capabilities are, what my experience is or isn't,
Hmm.
all of that other stuff goes we like will actually progress further and not waste any time blaming things.
Got
So I
it.
know I danced around the question.
No, no.
Um,
So you brought up a good point in the sense like that's a great meaning that communication is so core, but that communication is, based on what you're mentioning is so important, especially when it's delivering the real news, which could be equated with bad news, right? And
yes,
and then the person receiving it has to understand that, hey, this is where we are, so we can either work together to figure out and diagnose the solution and see, because a lot of times what I also see on these job sites is someone has in a situation, they communicate that to someone else, and that other person is reacting to that news, right?
yes,
And
yep,
then that's when the emotion comes in versus being like, okay, so you only have 4 pumpkin pies. All right, well, what can we do to get 6 by tomorrow or 2 more by tomorrow? Well, I'd have to go here and pick up the material and blah blah blah. Okay. but you're not doing that. Why? Because I have to be here to da da da. Well, if I can find someone to be here, can you go and get that, or can we have someone? Well, yeah, we could. I just don't know who that is. Well, I know who that is. I could have someone. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
like,
Yes.
instead of being
Yes.
like, oh my god, I said I needed six, and being stuck on the outcome versus let's diagnose it. That
Yep.
right? I mean, so that's the communication foundation on both sides, in sense of take the reactiveness out of it. Take in what they're saying, kind of
Yep.
diagnose it, and then yeah, look, at the end of the day, if there's nothing else that can be done, it is what it is, and you deal with it however
Yeah.
we need to. But there might be such certain things that the other person is just not seeing as options because of their own, whatever it might be, right? But at the very you and the way I took the question obviously is a little bit different, but what you also mentioned about going up the ladder 8 times versus two in terms of designing that work, you know that's also very obviously a very key point as well in terms of even with your sort of you ascending, if you will, right, from the
Yep.
trades to management to having your own business now. There's a lot of people like that are wondering what's the next step for me. They've been a foreman, they've been a shift lead for a while, right? So I would imagine that your ability to see things and move a little bit beyond above that, it's like, okay, so how is that? Why do they do it that way? And you go a little bit up the chain, right? So in that designing the work, I would imagine those are the kind of things that superintendents and supervisors kind of catch. Like, hey, this person's able to get more done in the same amount of time and do it well, and his area is clean. So let's, like you're saying, takes 15 minutes to learn how they're doing that. What does that look like? So what is that? So if someone is a shift lead or a foreman, right, in that designing or that planning part, what has worked for you in being able to create a not as 100% works all the time, but some things that they can start to be a better planner of how they're going to do something a certain day. What are
Oh,
some things that they can start with?
man. So this is specifically for foremen, and
Yeah.
it sounds so generic, but it transformed my life when I was a foreman. And so at first, I would create a weekly work plan, but I would create it on Friday, right? What am I going to need tomorrow? Da, 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 da. And so what happened was Monday, we didn't have the equipment or the material or the right personnel. And then I'm scrambling. And, I went from going to Home Depot in the supply house 3 times a day, every single day, to ordering material twice a week,
Wow.
which is dramatically different. And so the one thing I'll say two things. But the one big thing I did that helped me get out of my own way was I sat down and I wrote down my plan for next week. And I did that. My target was to have that done absolutely deadline Thursday lunchtime.
Got it.
Ideally, like my target was have it done by Wednesday evening.
Okay.
And the reason I wanted to have that done for Wednesday evening was because as I'm writing down who's going to be working where, and this person's moving up there, he's going to go run the refrigerant, she's going to go set the fixtures, whatever. Then it's like, okay, if that's what they're going to do I have the material here? Oh shit, let me go check. Do I have the equipment here? Oh crap, let me go check. Am I going to need more people? Or that task is finishing up, I need a home for them. So if I did that on Wednesday, Thursday, I'm calling supply houses, right? I'm calling the rental vendors, and
Right.
I'm getting my stuff in order so that I can have the resources there for the people to do the work on Monday. And
Nice.
all of a sudden, like everything just leveled out in terms of like emergencies or getting hit with curveballs. Rather, it left more room for the curveballs that I was going to get from the general contractor. Like straight up, that's what it did for me. And so, if you're a foreman, you've got to stabilize your environment first.
Mm.
And the best way to stabilize your environment is start planning next week's work on Wednesday. Who's going to be doing what? How many people are going to be doing it? Do you have the tools and the equipment and the material to execute those tasks? You have Thursday and Friday to procure that, and then Monday gets smooth, right?
Nice.
Now, once you do that, that gives us a little bit of breathing room. And I used to be caught up in I need Vanessa, I
Right.
need Noah, I need Doug. Every job I go to, I can't live without my precious crew. Right? Like I need them.
Yeah.
What I really needed was the processes and the methods that they operated by. And
Got it.
so If you go and look at your person, the most reliable, dependable person that gets things done, and what I mean by that, I don't mean the one that's willing to work 900 hours and work late and comes through with the cape. I mean the one that finishes on time all the time without rushing. Like
Yeah.
that's what you want.
Right.
And pay attention to how they do their work. How do they set up? How do they set themselves up? What do they do? Like, do they set their tools out first and then they get the material? Do they lay out on the floor for like, how are they going about executing the work? And write it down. Like get a video camera. Back in the day, I didn't have a camera. I mean, we did, but they were the big ones, right? Like you look like
Yeah,
the
the
damn
JVC
producer.
thing.
Record what they're doing, get their permission, of course, and then just start nitpicking, peel it apart. What is the process? What are the steps that they're taking to do the work? Because if you can pull that out, that's what you want to scale, right? That's what you want. That next person that comes up on your job, you want to say, hey, you're going to do this task, and this is how you're going to do it. I'm going to train you on how to do it, and I need you to follow these steps.
Yeah.
Because you've already proven that it's the most reliable method.
That's awesome. So Jesse, question on that. So if I'm a foreman, I'm listening to this, I'm like, all right, Wednesdays, and this kind of ties into what you were talking about even earlier about finding that 15 minutes, etc. The
Yep.
first thing I'm probably thinking about, man, Wednesdays is basically hump day. That's when the things are the craziest. I don't have time to even eat lunch. How am I supposed to
Yep.
even start planning, right? So speaking to that person, right? That's just like, dude, Jesse, you've been out of the game too long, bro. It's different now, right? It's
Oh
different
yeah.
now. Wednesdays are the nut. There's no chance for that. And my company doesn't want to pay overtime. So, so talk to that person and tell that person what can they do to really find that time and be deliberate about that, right?
Yeah. So two things. The very first most important thing, you're right, your company may not want to pay overtime. And if you're not willing to invest in yourself, why the hell would they pay you anymore? What I mean by that is sometimes you got to it's going to be like that sometimes. You got to sacrifice your personal time to get ahead.
Mm.
Bottom line, I'm not saying it's mandatory and necessary, but if that's your attitude, I promise you're going to struggle no matter what position you are. Or rather, maybe not struggle, you have the perfect mindset to stay exactly where you're at for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Is that clear?
What I hear from
Now,
that, Jesse, is that investment. You're investing in yourself
that's it.
because you're like someone's going to recognize it, but even if they don't right away, that's a reflection of who I am. That's my work.
Yes.
And no matter whether someone pays me an extra $20 an hour to do it, that's me. And what Jesse, is the people at the top, the people that have done it themselves, they recognize that and be like, how are we all of a sudden so more efficient? Well, Jesse's coming in where he's only going da da da. It's like Jesse did that. Like who asked him to do that? Nobody. He just all of a sudden it's like, okay,
Yep.
hey Jesse, like
Yes.
how you doing this? Right. That's the
That's
investment.
it. That's
You're
it.
investing in yourself. You're investing in and then someone's gonna see it, right?
Totally.
That's powerful, Jesse.
Totally.
That's awesome. So
The other thing,
I think that's an important mindset in the sense the company doesn't have to make it the easy thing for you and saying, hey, from 9 to 10, plan this out. It's something that the top performers kind of comes from within, right? Competition.
find a way.
Succeed, find a way. Love that.
I'll make it a little simpler. It's like that first kiss. My mom and my dad didn't schedule that. They didn't block out time on my day to make that happen. They didn't give me any training or pointers I figured out how to make that damn thing happen. Right?
Hey, Jesse, if you don't watch it, you're canceled, man. Come on.
Now, the other thing that I'll add, so, if you don't want to invest, you're going to stay where you're at. Bottom line. The other thing is this. I'll bet money that foreman that's saying like, there's no way I don't have time. They probably they spend at least once a week. They're driving to Home Depot or the parts house or the shop or somewhere to pick up material. That's at least an hour of time driving there, getting the crap, driving back.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to find that hour, send your apprentice to do that. Schedule or call your superintendent and say, hey, bro, can you pick this up for me because I'm going to be spending time doing this. So you can find that time by outsourcing some of the stuff that you shouldn't be doing anyways. A foreman, you should not be leaving the job site. You need like find a way, find somebody else, one of the journeymen, somebody within the business that can go and make that run for you. There's your 1 hour you need. And you're doing that 10 times a week. I promise.
Nice. Man, I love that. That's awesome. It's almost like we need to do a second part on this, man, just for training for foreman. Because I feel like that genuinely is because even for us, when clients call us and they want a foreman, and we have some people they want to talk to, the question that everyone asks, especially obviously for us, and don't hold this against us, we're in California, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's everyone's like, what's the next step for me here, right? And
Mm-hmm.
for the organizations that can say, here's what it is as a foreman, if you can do X, Y, and Z, and we're gonna, blah blah blah. Here's the pathway versus the hey man, you work hard, never know, you can come up, and it's like, and those are the companies that obviously expand because people are like, cool, all I need to do is these things consistently and going above beyond versus a
Yes.
very open ended like, hey man, just gotta put in your time and work hard and see how it goes. That's not as appealing anymore. But it's like that also has a big opportunity in terms of just being like, hey, these are the kind of things you need to know to come up in the trades and really be successful and really have the opportunities or create the opportunities for yourself for the heavy hitter stuff to further down the road that really changes the game.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And, maybe another extra credit, extra nugget, bonus nugget here. I learned the hard way. I always thought foremen had it easy, right? Because all they did was eat tacos and sit in the trailer all day. When I got to foreman role, that wasn't true. Then I was like, superintendents got it easy. All they do is drive around in their company trucks. Well, I got that job, and that ain't true either, right?
Yeah.
And as I progress, and so I'll tell you, like I frame it this way: every level that we go up on that org chart, the responsibility is greater. And what
Right.
I mean by responsibility is the responsibility to serve the people in your charge. If you're not serving the people that you're in charge of or that you're responsible to, you don't belong in that position.
Right.
If you're in that position and all of a sudden it's easier, go back, go back, go put the tools back on, because there's a tremendous, like, as we go up the org chart, we become more and more responsible and influential in the earning capacity and the careers of more people, and
Right.
affect them and their whole lot, their families, their wives, their husbands, their kids. It's not easier, man. It's
Yeah.
harder. That, just in case anybody's wondering.
Yeah, so I mean that's a great point because a lot of times people what got them there to that next position, right? They
Yep.
forget that they need to put in the same level of effort in a different way, right? So it's a different level of work, but that same thing is going to get them to the next step versus looking at the promotion to foreman or superintendent as the destination, right? So it's kind of like, hey, just because like this is not the time to just chill and relax, you know that you're being judged on different things, and I think that's so poignant what you just said. The responsibility is greater because you probably have the ability to impact a larger amount of people across the board,
Yes.
and
Totally.
that's a very powerful thing. So Jesse, just want to ask. So obviously with the different positions you've held in the career ascension and now owning your own business, you have the distinction of being able to add author to your title as well. You've already written 2 books. How does that come about? And talk to me about your most recent project as well.
10-4, man. I appreciate that. So it wasn't a planned thing, and kind of maybe another thing that's connected to my career trajectory is, man, pursue your curiosities, right? Like,
Mm,
I didn't have to study writing. And if you read any of the books, you'll know, like, I'm no grammar expert, but there is a way to publish your own book. And I learned it. Not only did I like learn it, YouTube's
right.
great, but I got a coach, right? The coach helped me with it. So the idea that my second book is Becoming the Promise You're Intended to Be. That's my book, the one that just came out. But the reason I call it my second book is because I had originally begun writing that book, and at the same time I was doing some live streams with Jennifer Lacey, and we
Okay.
are doing these live streams about some letters that I had received from an ex of mine. She had contextualized the 5S system, which is sort, set, shine, standardize, and sustain, which is very popular in manufacturing and in construction. Well, she applied it to our personal relationship. And I remember reading and I'm like, damn, this is good. I'm not going to do that, but this is awesome. Like it's going to. And
Right.
so I reached out to Jen and I had these letters for like 3 years because like I knew they were powerful and I would share them with friends and people were like, oh my God, did you write that? I'm like, no, like, okay, good. Cause you never could. Like, yeah, you're right. Anyhow, so I shared them with Jen and I'm like, hey girl, I have an idea. Like, what if we live stream? We have a live stream conversation for each S, and each
Nice.
of these letters apply to our relationships, and we'll just share, our mistakes, our missteps, professionally and personally. And
Right.
she's like, "You're crazy, but let's do it." Okay, so we did. And the first one we did, people showed up, which was like amazing. And not only did they show up, but they started sharing like their concerns and their failures and their cheat codes, the things that they did that kind of helped them in their relationships. And it was like, this is a thing. So we did the second one and people reached like it got momentum. We planned 5. We ended up doing 7 because we had a closing and we had another really emotional one where we had 5 construction leaders come up on the screen with us and talk about how their hyper focus on the job led to really negative outcomes in their personal life with their families, with their wives and their kids, et cetera.
Right.
And a friend, Kirby Coates, reached out and she's like, Jess, I've watched all the live streams. Y'all are fun. And she's like, I wish there was a place I could go that had like the nuggets that were shared in all of the live streams instead of having to watch 8 hours of you babbling. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. And so I had the transcripts, like, because I transcribed the video I didn't do it. I have an app that does that. And
Sure.
I said, well, I'll find them and I'll pull them out. And I read about 10 minutes. I said, man, I ain't going to read all of this stuff. I was working on the other book. Right.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to my coach and I said, I have an idea. And she's like, uh-oh, what do you got? I said, well, here's the deal. I got 8.5 hours of content, transcribed content that we could turn into a book. Like, is that crazy? And she's like, actually, no, that's really good. And so paused the book. Jennifer and Lacey and I spent whatever that was, massaging, producing, a lot of guidance from from the coach. And so we released the Lean in Love book. Oh my God, it's probably been 2 years now, just over 2 years.
Nice.
And it's not like your conventional book. Jennifer did all the illustrating, and like the book is kind of quotes from what we said in the live stream, she and I, quotes and best practices that other construction professionals, construction leaders shared in the live stream, and some other like context to kind of tie it all together. And so that's out there. People have already shared like, man, I read like there's some easy things that I'm took from the book that I'm using on the job site or that I'm using at home with my wife and or with my kids or with my husband. Like that, and that's like the most meaningful thing. Are we like Wall Street Journal #1? No. New York Times bestseller? No. But we've impacted a life or two, and that's pretty damn
That's
awesome,
awesome.
right? Right, in terms of
No,
fulfillment.
for sure.
So that finished, and then I'm like, okay, I got to get back on the other book. And one thing that like I learned as we were doing those live streams was the value of vulnerability. And
Mm.
like at first, when I hear it, sometimes I still want to roll, even though I say it all the time. People would tell me like, Jess, you're super vulnerable. How'd you get that way? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. like I really don't know. You tell me I'm vulnerable. I don't know what that means. And they would say, well, like, Jess, you always talk about the dumb things that you did. Like, oh, they're like, yeah, that's being vulnerable. Like admitting your mistakes openly. That's a
Right.
that's a measure of vulnerability. I was like, oh, like, yeah, I do that all the time. Okay, I agree. I'm vulnerable. And so I took that lesson, right? Because when we were doing it on the live streams, like the people were being vulnerable on the internet, right? Like in the chat, they were sharing very intimate things that they didn't share anywhere else. And so I took that as a signal like, well, it's hard to be vulnerable when everybody around me is not.
Right.
But if I see somebody in front of me being vulnerable, I all of a sudden get permission to be vulnerable. And there's healing in the vulnerability.
Right. Right.
So that it was that thought that's okay, this book, I need to do it differently. And so I did. And so it's 20 stories of the learnings and missteps that I've had in my life. Some of them are back when I was a kid, some of them are like a year ago, everything in between. And it's just the painful, shameful, embarrassing, disgusting things that I did and what I learned from them. And the point is most of us are suffering in silence. Most
Right.
of us think our life is difficult because we're defected. Like there's something wrong with us. The fact is, we're all suffering.
Mm.
We're all making mistakes. And so what my intent is one of those stories, one of those really dumb things I did, or maybe not so dumb things that I did, somebody can connect with them and discover that they're not alone. It turns out at the like after I put all the stories together and I'm going back and like reading them and editing them, which I hate, a whole bunch of them are connected to my experience with substance abuse, with alcoholism and drug addiction. I didn't plan to do it that way. It just ended up that way. And also, like, I got arrested a lot, right? So there's a story for each arrest. And, my mom read the book and she was worried. She's like, Mijo, I'm really scared. Like, you just started a business and you put all your junk out there. Like, what if people don't want to work with you anymore? And
Yeah.
I said, oh, I never thought of that first. Second, like, I understand. Like, all of those things are true. I never hid them. And I also never, like, there was really no venue to talk about them.
Right. Right.
But, if they choose not to work with me, I respect that and honor that. Like, I get it. Not everybody wants me around their people, and I get it. What's interesting is my clients and the people like my network and the omniverse, the LinkedIn and all this stuff, the response is exactly the opposite because well, now they know all the dirt on me. But the good thing is like nobody has leverage on me anymore. It's in the book, whatever. You can't threaten me with it. But more importantly, people are more connected and more comfortable and more apt to say, oh my goodness, I'm living the same life and I don't have to.
Right.
And so helping people get unstuck, that's what I want to do. That's what I want that book to accomplish. I want it to help people that are maybe wound up in self-destructive behavior, in low self-image, just lost and feel like they're just going through groundhog day every day. I want that book to help shift their head, just a little kick in the head and
Yeah.
say, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be this way because it doesn't.
Right. But and for me, Jesse, that's very interesting because for me, it's kind of like you being on your own now, like you were mentioning. Every time you've ascended a position, there's a new responsibility, and now it's like it's very admirable to see the responsibility you're taking on of being able to have the impact. Obviously, as a business owner now, like the way you can have the impact is completely immeasurable. Meaning, it's so significant sharing your story, and for you that's really exemplifying everything that you're preaching as well. So that's that's
Thank
that's
you.
impressive, that's admirable, and that's definitely something that I think the industry will resonate to and already has in a big way, because there's a big need for even Jesse from 30 years ago, right, starting out,
Yeah.
because someone's going to read it and say, hey man, that's the path, that's where I'm headed, right? And some
Yes.
things are great, something needs a little alignment, but it's a great kind of playbook, or just even tale for people to say, hey, this is, despite challenges that come up, here's a path that you can have, and there's no telling that what it's going to look like 20, 30 years from now. A person that might be struggling today can be an author, can be a well-known speaker, business owner, and have the career trajectory that you've had, and that can be the meaning, that can be the difference between them going down the left, the road, the fork in the
Yep.
road, basically, right, and then choose
Yes.
that path. So I think that's extremely powerful, and I really appreciate you being willing to share that. So Jesse, coming towards the end here, what is the easiest way for people to get a hold of you, connect with you? Obviously, as I mentioned, we will be buying 10 copies of the book and being able handing it out to our audience, and I've said a lot of our episodes and things like that. But for those of the people that want to connect with you and work with you and just learn from you and your journey, what's the easiest way to connect with you?
Two ways. First, like the one way that you're gonna get my attention and I will connect with you is on LinkedIn. So I have my LinkedIn. I'll get you the link for the
Yep, we'll
bio.
have the handle for sure.
Yep. So LinkedIn, I'm like hyper active on LinkedIn. I'm on all the socials, but LinkedIn
Yep.
is where I spend most of my time.
Okay.
And then my website, depthbuilder.com,
Nice.
my contact and all of that stuff, it's right in there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jesse, thank you again for really sharing your journey and being a part of this podcast that we have going in the journey. And you also have a great podcast, which we'll also be happy to link to at the bottom. So your LinkedIn, your website, and your podcast link. But I really appreciate you connecting with me and us here personally. And I have a feeling that you and I are going to do some other shows together, my man. You got a lot of knowledge. You got a
I
good
feel it
vibe, and
too,
I
bro.
feel like we'll riff. By the way, I am actually going to be in San Antonio in 2 weeks. We have a trade show the first week of November. I don't know if you're around, but I'll let you know. And
Yes.
we have a 3 or 4 day trade show that we're doing on the emergency response side. So would love to connect with you and grab some food and just catch up in person and talk
Yeah,
about some how
man.
we're going to make some bigger things happen in 2024.
Yes, and I will take you to the right places for the best damn tacos in town. Like it
All
ain't
right,
where they tell you; it's where I know where to take you.
Jesse knows, right? Nice, man. Well, thanks again for joining us, Jesse. Really appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for watching. Episode has a lot of value. And Jesse, looking forward to staying in touch and talking about the next project.
10-4. Thank you, brother.
Take it easy. Thanks a lot.